I'm Dr. Hackie Reitman. Welcome to another episode of Exploring Different Brains. Today we're lucky to have returning to us Lisa Wood Shapiro, the fabulous writer who also just happens to have dyslexia too. Lisa, welcome again to Exploring Different Brains.
Thank you for having me.
Many people think of dyslexia as just the inability to read. They don't see the flip side of it with writing.
It's the other side of the coin, and Dr. Eden, who is the executive director at Georgetown Center for Learning, I said to her, I can read. Well, I thought I read really fast till I took the Lexplore test that's in the piece too, but reading had been kind of conquered, and I was very, very, very lucky to be in a school system that diagnosed me and put me into a very intensive summer reading program with a speed reader, and that's in the piece. And I think that made me a reader, and it came later. Like I think I wanted to read Judy Blume's Forever, or so I wanted to be part of, and I began to read as a teen for pleasure. Now the writing thing, I used to think, well, when I get older, I'm going to be a better speller. And I am amazed at the fact that subset of words, and I kind of write the repeat offenders in the piece, definitely, abominable, I think there's a bunch, maintenance, these silly words, they continue to bedevil me. And I had this acceptance a long time ago that I was not a good speller. I could not spell well. It didn't come easy to me. It was part of my dyslexia, but I really just decided to move on and write and deal with it. Yeah.
Let me ask you about another kind of technology you spoke about a bit, which is the emerging technology of diagnosing,
right?
Functional MRIs and so forth.
Wait, you asked me. I just want to also finish this question because I actually have a better way to say why is spelling the other side of the coin of dyslexia, and it's absolutely hand in hand. And I just want to say, and I can get into the functional imaging fMRI that I took, but it has to do with long-term memory and decoding on the other, like the side of the brain. So what happened with me, and it wasn't ever going to get fixed. So that's the other thing about dyslexia. Some things won't get fixed. So when I contacted Dr. Eden, I had heard her on NPR, and there's a link in my piece about this, where she had talked about our brains. So the last time our brains evolved was 10,000 years ago. Reading is relatively new. It's 5,000 years old, but that was the 1%, maybe rabbis, scribes, monks were reading, royal families. Then the general population, a literate population, is only a couple hundred years old, maybe longer, And so we're using a part of our brain that was really meant to say that's an object, like that's a woolly mammoth. I mean, think about, and we've hijacked that area and used it for reading. And so what happened when I went for my fMRI, the left side, when I'm taking a reading test, should be, all activated. That's where I should be doing. But the dyslexic brains can have different patterns, the way they look in an fMRI, but mine was pretty standard. All of the reading was on the right side of the brain. And so if you think about someone and the brain's plasticity, when you have a stroke or something, it rewires itself. I don't know why the dyslexic brain does that, but I was shocked at what a classic kind of fMRI. I didn't really want to share it in the piece once I saw it. And so there's two things I could say. The muscle for me to be some great speller, I have used flashcards as a child to try and get there. And there's something going on in the dyslexic brain, at least my brain, where it won't retain the correction. It might for a little while. I might have a gimmick for it. I might have a thing. But it's because of the way the brain is activated and what it looks like. It's really using different areas to read.
Now, I love the fact that you talk about specific tools such as Grammarly. And when I wrote the Asper Tools book on Asperger's and autism and neurodiversity, it was my goal to give specific tools that you can really use. So, what other tools? Now, Grammarly, you said, is your major league writing tool. And what other tools do you use in your everyday life, like a GPS?
I do. Well, I actually have a fabulous sense of direction, which I've also heard from other dyslexics. So I do use Google Maps, but I mean, I don't know if you feel this way with your work, but I'm so happy to be alive now. I love. I mean, Grammarly is such a it's true AI. I mean, it really is learning from its users. To some degree, whether how big that is, I don't know. They're not going to reveal it, but I mean, Microsoft Word, I use Microsoft Office. I didn't even know the term or think I needed accessibility. Like I didn't use a tech, accessibility or think about that. I've never used dictation, but a lot of people, swear by dictation and they actually get word like one dyslexic, really common, and it's not a cheat, it just works, is to say the word and have the word be spelled through dictation. And dictation software like Grammarly is getting better and better and better. Microsoft is making a whole suite of tools that are going to be part of the Office. And, the Office of the future is going to have all of this tech. And you're going to have one person who has to focus, and you're going to have next to them someone with maybe dyslexia, and you're going to have someone next to them with Asperger's or on the spectrum or autistic, and they're all going to have their different tech that brings this dynamic neurodiverse space together. And I think that's what's probably the thing. And also, this was the thing that hampered me, and I don't know if this is just me or dyslexics that are now adults. On my best days, I felt I'd outgrown it, or I wasn't part of any dyslexic community. I never went to a dyslexic website. I should have. I didn't go to a conference. I didn't read books on it. I have 3 kids. One child has dyslexia and actually goes to school and uses Orton Gillingham, which is a great way to learn to read. And so I felt plugged in. But had I spent a few minutes Googling best dyslexic apps of 2018 or 2017, or, a few years ago, I could have helped myself. And so there's part of it. It wasn't that I was a self-hating dyslexic, but I felt that I was working along and had the tech I needed with just a word product, like we don't even call it like Microsoft Word. And so I would say anyone listening to this, at least be plugged into your tribe. I mean, dyslexic people were, anywhere from 5 to 17%. That's a huge margin. There's different degrees of it. I probably was on the more severe. I would, there's no scale, but I'll make one up right now. Like if you had a scale, 1 being very just a touch dyslexic and 10 being extremely dyslexic, I was probably a 7. I'm making this up, but so I do cringe a bit that I hadn't sought out better tools for writing sooner. And I did happen on it in an organic way, but I think if you were ever diagnosed as dyslexic and you're continuing as an adult, it is something I would recommend. And so it wasn't hubris, but I definitely didn't plug into my community. And I also think this is a growth industry. People are seeing their offices as places that want to have this type of thinking. And I mean, when I talk to other dyslexic, and especially with this piece, I mean, we can talk about, the volume of feedback on this piece was enormous. And it wasn't just an email, a little email, it was life stories. And over again, there's a theme that comes out. And one of them is, I can't prove this, but I think dyslexic minds are storyteller minds. And we want to tell our stories. And so whatever tool can help, whether it's dictation, whether it's, or the flip side is you're going to have an app on your phone that can snap a picture of text and read it back to you. And I think there's so many tools out there. And think you can't wait for you to discover it. Maybe seek it out a little. And I think that, it's going to be marketed more and more, I do believe.
Well, I think what's happening is more and more of every kind of neurodiversity there is, or quote, coming out of the closet, so to speak. And more we're seeing the advantages to big companies of hiring different kinds of brains, and some of the people I've had the honor of interviewing, like yourself, Professor Matthew Schneps, who's one of the world's great astrophysicists, is totally dyslexic. Not only that, he can't add up numbers. He has to use a calculator.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different things, and none of it occurs in isolation either. So it's all kind of a mix and match. I would ask you this: have you ever written by using dictating voice-to-text software?
No, and I never will. It doesn't work for me. I almost believe that if I had an old typewriter, I would do my best work. I love the process of writing. And
let me interrupt you to give you a challenge.
Okay.
Here's the challenge. Forget about voice to text. Just, dictate a story as though you were writing it. You're just using a different part of your brain, and have it transcribed by whatever means you want. And then sit at a computer and write the story yourself, and then handwrite it yourself, and you'll have 3 different stories because they all use different parts of your brain.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't say, there's other stuff too. No, absolutely.
You love writing the way you write.
As you can see, look, I jump around. It actually drives certain friends crazy. They tell me, one friend told me the other day, you hijack a conversation. And I do try. I mean, I have to actively think, stay on topic, don't jump. When I talk to others dyslexics, especially Gil Gershoni said something interesting to me, and he's the one who runs the Gershoni agency out in San Francisco. And he said, when he's in a client, my brain works very, very fast. An idea comes to an idea, and it's a link, and it goes much faster. And people will say, how did you come up with that? And I can't tell you. And he said, the most important thing for us is we have to regulate. And I thought that was a good word, slow it down. And that's what also can make it hard for people to work under a micromanager as a subordinate in an office. How did you come to that idea? And they might not be able to show the work, certain minds, the ways certain people think. I do believe that's true. I think I'm smartest, I am clearest when I'm forced to put something on paper and revise it. Every piece I write has probably been revised 8 times. And
you also sound like you have a little bit of something I have. Like I got expelled from the yeshiva I had authority problems, and I think you have a little bit of an authority problem too.
Well, no, if I had to be, I could be a good waitress sometimes. What I think that also comes from some part of dyslexic, because it almost makes you an entrepreneur. You're like, well, I think I'm going to not be able to be good in that position. I'll start my own production. I started a production company in my 20s that made stuff for Viacom within a year. I mean, I do think there's that. Not to say I couldn't, I'll never get a job. No, but not to say I'm very good at what I do writing wise. And I don't have an issue. And also I'm a good collaborator, but maybe it comes from being little and told I couldn't do things, and that fine line between where agency says, well, I'm going to do it anyway. Of course I'm going to, be a writer. This was in the piece, used to be, and it might still be this, you'd get a career survey when you were 13, when you'd take certain aptitude tests, and I'd put down literary, and they said, yeah, between your test and your answers to the question, you could, but maybe you should look into something else. And I was like,
McDonald's is looking for people like you know.
I think I do think the way, well, it gets back to neurodiversity. I actually like the way people think, and I'm fascinated by that. I did just read the book Deep Work because right now I'm working on a new book, and I'm not great when I'm in the shallows and checking Twitter or answering a phone call. And I really, the book talks about how can you get that really deep cognitive work you need as a knowledge worker, as a writer, you need to do that, or if you're coding. And he says, as a novice, when you first start, okay, I'm gonna, no interruptions, no distractions, you can do an hour. And I thought, I'm sure I could do more than an hour. And my first day where I was clocking, it was 45 minutes. And it worked out, I'm trying to get to 4 to 6 hours, but it's the paradox you talked about. I think no matter what you have, you still also have, that's the one muscle I will continue to work. I'm not going to flashcards with spelling, but getting to that deep work because I'll get a lot more done in 4 hours than I will in 2 days in the shallows, and so that's a hard thing for me. And maybe that's my own ADHD. I mean, I don't believe in multitasking anymore. For me, at least.
Yeah, well, again, what we're trying to do at differentbrains.org is just get everybody to look through the prism of each of our brains is different. Like my daughter said, they're like a snowflake, no two are alike, and to harness the strengths of however that individual's brain works. You're obviously smarter than the average bear, okay? Whatever labels you might have, whether it's ADHD, OCD, dyslexia, and again, nothing occurs in isolation. But if we just look through the prism of harnessing each of our strengths and helping that individual maximize their potential, then people have a better odds, if they get exposed to all different things, to find what they love doing, they're good at doing, they'll get paid for doing, they'll help other people while they're doing it. And that's the perfecter if you can do it. You seem to have found it. You found motherhood. You love writing. Your whole body language changes when you talk about writing. You're happy to be alive, and your brain is different. Well, big deal, So God gave you a smart brain, and some people get high octane brains like yours and other people don't. But whatever you have to do, that's your brain.
True. And I will say, I also think, what a lucky time to be alive. The thing that gives me agita is when I saw a photo of Jane Austen's writing desk and it was a quill, ink, and a little table. I thought, well, I wouldn't have worked. Not for me.
Well, you wouldn't have had all these distractions like being interviewed for an episode of Exploring Different Brains. You would have been writing and doing something productive, you see? Well,
but or going off to so that's what I'm trying to do now. I'm about to kind of use August to finish a book now, and I'm actually in a couple of days going off to a fishing village where I know no one. And so that's going to be my next project for a couple of weeks.
Tell us about your children.
So I have 3 children. I have one child. So I have they're now 17, 15, and 12.
Oh boy.
I was very young. And one of my children, my middle child, I knew, I don't want to say too much because it's his story, but I did know that he was similar to me. And I immediately got an evaluation. Now, dyslexia, you can't get that evaluation till a little later. But by 5, I enrolled him in a school that really was for a special, unique learner. There were 12 kids in the class. There was a smart board. Also, there was sensory audio processing. There was a bunch of stuff that I probably also had as a child. Dyslexia is highly heritable, 40%. So I knew. And it was interesting. I don't know if you noticed in the Wired piece, they also made a short film. They did an excellent job. It's about 6 minutes. And I showed it to my 12-year-old who goes to a typical learner school in New York City. We live in New York City and my kids go to public school. And he turned to me at the end of the movie and he goes, I think I might be a little dyslexic. So, like everyone has, probably. And then I've got one child who can spell anything. And that's the one I'm like, hey, how do you spell? The other thing is, I'm Jewish. I always thought, Hebrew was very challenging for me. I had a bat mitzvah. And so, like that was the added bonus of being dyslexic and Jewish.
Going right to left and left to right.
Just makes it even more fun. So that was, and then, so, I was there and really supportive about it. I would say, our home has a lot of neurodiversity, and I'm very aware of different things that we can all do well. I wouldn't say we're a great camping team anymore after the last camping trip, but but it's funny to me. Only recently am I talking to people that had dyslexia, and I'm totally jumping around this conversation. But I was going to say one of the more interesting conversations I had right after this piece came out was a friend of mine that I've gone to school with since I was in 7th grade, sat next to me, and he didn't know I was dyslexic because I was by 7th grade doing everything I could to hide it and doing well in honors, and then messing up on an aptitude test. And then he was in college and a professor did it and he really wanted to talk. So we had a conversation. And I thought, how funny that we sat next to each other for six years in school. And you didn't know I was dyslexic and you didn't even know you were dyslexic. And we were all taking in information. And I think it was probably harder for him. And I think, we live in a time, and also that Lexplore test. I mean, we live in a time where diagnosis can happen early and efficiently. And I think the meanest person on earth is a parent or someone in that person's orbit. When they ask for a word, give it to them. Don't make them sound it out. Don't make them go get a dictionary. That book does not work if you're too far off of a spelling. Give them, what lesson are you teaching them by shaming them about not spelling? Or if they take in books better through an Audible book, let them. I think whatever, and that might be a throwback to other generations, but people take in information in different ways, and more we're going to see that. And one of the most interesting thing that Dr. Eden said when I was interviewing her, she doesn't know if we're going to be reading in 2,000 years. Maybe we'll take in our information through a different way.
How do people find out more about you?
My website links to a lot of things. It's lisawoodshapiro.com. Also, I'm on Twitter as Lisa W. Shapiro. You can find me there, and I often will post about the pieces I've written. I'm on Amazon. You can get Hot Mess Mom. And the Wired story is still easy to look up, and that's How Technology Helped Me Cheat Dyslexia.
Is there anything we have not covered today that you'd like to cover, Lisa?
I think, well, there's a couple of things I could talk about the feedback. I noticed that dyslexia can be devastating. It can be devastating for people that didn't have a supportive school environment or were in a vulnerable position at a young age and were told they weren't going to be any, the letters I got that I thought were not sad or tragic, but people that really had to overcome were people a generation above me, baby boomers, that might not have had that kind of luck of getting an early diagnosis or had been in a school system that didn't support them or told them they weren't going to do well. And though, and whether that person has agency to overcome that and, and be like, screw you, I'm smart, not everyone has that. And so I was surprised by that. I was also surprised by people that are getting a late diagnosis. They suspect something was up, especially if you're on the, you're mildly dyslexic, so you could kind of get through. You didn't have the bells and whistles. I had a lot of bells and whistles, I guess, as an 8-year-old. But so that was interesting. I think now more than ever, people are aware of it. I also think the dark side of this is there is there is a market of quote unquote cures for dyslexia. And I think the most vulnerable person is a parent who doesn't know a lot about dyslexia and somehow thinks, and I'm not going to say exactly what the cures are, and people reached out to me to cure me. There is no liquid that you can put in your body. I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but there is no cure. And I think there was a dyslexic association that I'd been Googling, and this didn't end up in the piece, but they had a poster up for parents saying, do not fall for any of these gimmicks. And so one of the things that parents that have gotten a diagnosis of a child about dyslexia, it's not an easy fix. Basically, someone is going to tell you life is going to be harder for your child. And that's a very hard thing for a parent to hear. But I would say the flip side of that is this is the challenge. And if your child can overcome this challenge and kind of love this challenge, what a gift that's going to be. And be very aware that there is a market that preys on vulnerable people, trying to tell them they can cure it. And you can't.
Lisa Wood Shapiro, it's been a pleasure having you here on this episode of Exploring Different Brains. Thanks for coming back again.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Exploring Different Brains is a production of Different Brains, Inc. For more information, visit us at differentbrains.org.